We're headed into the final week of the Cowboys' regular season, and Mike McCarthy's future is the biggest talking point in Dallas. And tonight, I want to talk about that, and particularly about that possible scenario that people are discussing. Could Mike leave even if the Cowboys wanted him back? What is up, everyone, and welcome into A to Z Sports Dallas Primetime. I am your host, Mauricio Rodriguez. How about we jump right into it today? Mike McCarthy is on the final week of his deal, essentially. I think it's going to be a couple of weeks after the season that a contract actually expires. But the Cowboys are in a funny situation right now with McCarthy because he's not extended. So as of now, he has one game left on his deal. The same goes for Mike Zimmer, Brian Schottenheimer, and essentially the entire coaching staff that you've got in Dallas. And it's getting pretty interesting because recently there's been some reports kind of suggesting that other NFL teams might be interested in McCarthy if the Cowboys do not re-sign him. And I'm thinking about Jay Glazer from Fox Sports dropping this report on Sunday, minutes before the game kicked off, where he essentially said, and I think this is the exact quote, Mike McCarthy is on other teams' coaching lists if Dallas decides not to resign him. And then there was another report from Ian Rappaport and Tom Pelissero where they brought up McCarthy's name when talking about the New Orleans Saints. They didn't report that the Saints were going to be interested in him explicitly, but they did say the Saints are likely going to look at familiar faces, and McCarthy fits that kind of mold for New Orleans because of the general manager and everything. So there is that. And you kind of start hearing from multiple sources or multiple reporters that McCarthy could have a shot at landing a job if he leaves Dallas. And things become a little bit interesting. Earlier in December, the 13th, I actually remember the date, I wrote a story for ADC Sports speculating on Mike McCarthy potentially leaving for Chicago. Now, this was just a fun article, a theory, if you will, where I was like, well, McCarthy knows the division, the NFC North. He is known as a quarterback guru, and they have Caleb Williams over there. So you could see how that could make sense. And mostly, the Bears are a team that would kill for a 12-win season like the ones the Cowboys had for 3 consecutive years, which I think is important. If you're the Bears and you're building a team and you're just desperate as an ownership to become relevant again, and you're looking at coaches that are winning regular season games, that might be enough for them. Whereas with the Cowboys, the conversation is a little bit different because the Cowboys have been in the playoffs. The Cowboys have been winning in the regular season, not in 2024, granted, but the conversation with Dallas has always been, can they take that next step? Can they go from a playoff team to a legit contender? The Bears might look at their situation and they might be like, screw it, we'll take the regular season success at this point if it's guaranteed, which it wouldn't be, of course, but you get what I'm saying here. And it was just that, a fun theory, kind of looking at that possibility. McCarthy talks about how he loves the Midwest and all that. So I thought it was interesting. Chase Daniel then talked about it on Fox Sports as well. And I thought, hey, well, we are thinking about the same thing, more or less here. So yeah, it's gotten a little bit noisier and noisier and noisier. And I cannot help but think, can you imagine how chaotically fun a situation like that would be? Because the Mike McCarthy future is essentially, there's 3 options that you can choose from. Number 1, the Cowboys run it back with Mike McCarthy. And at times, this sounds pretty likely when you listen to the way the Cowboys front office is talking about the season, because they're making it about the injuries. They're making it about how impossible it is to overcome the many, many injuries that the Cowboys suffered, which to a degree is true. Dallas was pretty banged up this year. A lot of Pro Bowlers, old pro players, ended up in IR. Micah Parsons didn't, but he did miss 4 games. So they were banged up. But of course, the team wasn't good enough to begin with. And we saw that early in the year when the Cowboys got blown out by the Ravens, when they got blown out by the Saints. Even against the Lions, you weren't entirely hurt. You had a lot of injuries, of course, but Dak played, CeeDee Lamb played, You had a lot of players on that one, and you still got absolutely destroyed. And this is all to say that the Cowboys have kind of been shaping their narrative a little bit for a Mike McCarthy return to make sense if that's the path they want to take. So option number one, Mike McCarthy running it back. Number two is, the Cowboys do not resign Mike McCarthy, and then McCarthy either walks away from football temporarily or he lands elsewhere, maybe with the Bears, maybe with the Saints, teams like this. Or option number three, and this would be one of the lowest lows in franchise history, the Cowboys want him back. And then McCarthy says, listen, I'm going to take this other job. I would find that very unlikely. But in theory, if it would happen, it could, right? Because his contract is going to be up. So he's going to be a free agent, essentially, which Mike McCarthy was asked about this on the press conference today, on Monday. And he said, you know what? We'll talk about that next week. I'm not going to talk about it now because I'm focused on winning. Basically, it's what he said. In theory, yes, it could happen. McCarthy's deal is going to be up and he would be free to do whatever he wanted to. I still think it's unlikely, though. And again, if it happened, it would be the lowest low ever for the Cowboys because the way that I see it is Dak Prescott wants him back. The Cowboys, hypothetically, in this scenario, would want him back. And him walking away would just show that McCarthy is done with the way the Cowboys do things, that he is done with the way they set him up for a bad 2024 season when they refused to address so many needs on the roster. And maybe it would just show that he's sick of the way that the Cowboys do things. But I still don't think it's very likely. And here are several reasons why. I think McCarthy would be taking a huge risk, right? These coaching decisions, they happen during a very short span because teams are scrambling to know who am I hiring, who is off, who is available, who is being hired by other teams. So for McCarthy to really shop for another job and to be open to listen to pitches, number one, he would have to know he's not the hottest name in the market right now because you've got a Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson can take his time because he's going to be just fine if he waits. McCarthy, not really, right? McCarthy would be a surprise hiring in the head coaching space in 2025. So the reason why I say this is the Cowboys are likely, if they want to keep him, they're going to have to make an offer before his contract expires. And if McCarthy wants to shop for a new job, then he would have to wait out the contract to really start talking to other teams. Now, you might think, Mo, don't be naive. These people are talking to each other all the time, and that might be true. But I was very interested in listening to the Athletic podcast not that long ago when you had that an NFL insider talk about Bill Belichick taking the new job over at North Carolina. And one of the factors that he described behind Belichick's decision was that he didn't want to wait until January to get an idea as to what the coaching space would look like. And that's because Brian Flores' lawsuit to the NFL is still ongoing. And the teams are really not taking these risks of talking to other coaches earlier than they should. Because with the lawsuit in place, a scrutiny is being exercised by the NFL in punishing these kind of actions. So it wouldn't make sense for McCarthy, in my opinion, to have an offer to stick around in Dallas as the head coach for a few more years, only to risk listening from other teams and get a real idea as to how interested they are in him. And maybe he walks away empty-handed, right? If he's waiting to tell the Cowboys yes or no, and then shopping for a new job, and then that job closes up, and then the Cowboys are like, oh, sorry. In the meantime, we got our guy. We got to kill him more. I'm just kidding, but someone. And that would be a big risk for McCarthy. And I think practically it kind of kills the whole narrative of, oh, McCarthy could end up with another team. And then additionally, he would have to move from one city to another. That would be tough, especially if it's unnecessary. He values continuity, so he would likely like to stay with what he's built in Dallas. He clearly loves Dak Prescott, so there's that to it as well. And Dak is lobbying for him to return. Mike McCarthy basically turning down an opportunity to coach the Cowboys another year would be insane. So this is all to say, I know this narrative is gaining some momentum and people are talking about it, but the more I think about it, the more it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I know McCarthy was asked about it in the press conference today, and I understand why. And as I said, I wrote about this earlier in the month, but I really think it's if he is offered to stay, he's gonna stay. I think. I don't think McCarthy's gonna be like, nah, let me check out this Chicago Bears job or this New Orleans Saints job. And then let's see what they want as well. What those teams want. I could see why a team would be interested in McCarthy. He would bring some stability. He has done it before. He can develop a quarterback. Dak Prescott's best career year ever happened on the Mike McCarthy. So I could see that happening. But then again, with the way the NFL is going, I think most forward-looking front offices would bet on a young coach from that Shanahan McVay tree. So someone like Ben Johnson, who is not really from that coaching tree, but you get what I mean. So yeah, I don't know what Mike McCarthy's future looks like, but I think that possibility, I've been thinking about it all day long, and I wanted to do the show about this because I'm not sure it's going to happen. What is very interesting, though, by the way, is Mike Zimmer's future. And shout out to Joe Hoyt from Old City, Dallas, because he talked about it post-game yesterday. He talked about how Mike Zimmer kind of sounded not very in love with the way the season is going, which is naturally. But this is what Joe Hoyt said. I think one caveat to remember with the Mike Zimmer discussion, though, and I think it really came to a head this week, Mike Zimmer was asked by Ed Werder from ESPN, are you having fun this year? And Zimmer joked, oh yeah, I'm having a blast. In terms of potentially coming back, Zimmer said, we'll see at the end of the year. And it is true. In that press conference, Mike Zimmer also said, it's been hard. I'm not going to lie about that. It's hard. It's been hard. And you can see it in his voice. You can hear it in his voice. I agree with Joe. I think it's not a fact that Zimmer is going to be super convinced about running it back in 2025. So that's something to look out for as well. And I would argue if McCarthy is out of the picture and the Cowboys are going to run it, going to go in another direction with a new coach, and Zimmer doesn't really want to adapt to that, you could see Zimmer leaving. Not even for another team. You could see Zimmer just calling it a career. He's going to be 69 years old by the time the next season kicks off. So I feel like everything is on the table for Mike Zimmer right now. A lot of coaching uncertainty for the Cowboys. And even though that is frustrating for the fans because obviously we don't know what the future is going to look like, it should make for a fun offseason. It really should. In the meantime, though, hit the like button for me if you enjoyed the show. And I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.